Welcome to Dawn Treader Stories, and today we present to you The Mirror in the Ravine. When Ethan jerked awake, gasping, his heart thundered in his chest as if it was trying to break free. His hands trembled, clutching the sheets, but his mind clung to the fragments of the dream, the sensation of falling weightless, as if the world had let go of him. A ravine opened below him, jagged rocks rising to meet him. He could still feel the wind screaming past his ears, the suffocating panic of knowing he was going to die. And then, the shadowy figure. It had loomed over him just before impact, black as night, with no features, only two pale, slitted eyes that held no malice but something stranger, expectation. "Find the mirror," it whispered. "The enchanted mirror shows what's to come. You must find it." The dream should have faded with the morning sun, but it lingered, more than that. Ethan glanced down at his hands, and his breath hitched. Leaves were stuck to his palms. Twigs tangled in his dark hair. His bare arms were scratched as if he'd fought his way through a forest in the middle of the night. His bed was a mess of branches, moss, and dirt. He bolted upright, his cottage bathed in weak morning light leaking through the windows. What the hell happened? He ran his hands through his hair, dislodging more forest debris. It was impossible. He hadn't left his bed, had he? A knot of fear tightened in his chest, and with it came the certainty that the dream wasn't just a dream. Something had reached across the divide between sleep and reality and dragged him into the woods. Someone, or something, wanted him to find that mirror. There was only one person who could help Ethan make sense of this. Marlowe, the old hermit who lived deep in the forest. Marlowe knew strange things, whispered of realms beyond sight, and spoke in riddles that most people dismissed as nonsense. But Ethan had visited him before, seeking guidance in times of doubt, and Marlowe never failed to give answers, even if they weren't the answers Ethan wanted. He hurried out of the cottage, leaves still clinging to his skin, and made his way into the heart of the forest. The hermit's final message. The forest thickened as Ethan ventured deeper, shadows stretching between the towering trees. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and pine. Every crunch of fallen leaves beneath his boots was swallowed by the quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. At last, the cave came into view, a dark mouth yawning at the base of a hill, surrounded by a tangle of briars. Ethan hesitated at the entrance, wiping sweat from his brow. He'd been here many times before, but this time it felt different. The air seemed heavier, as if it carried the weight of secrets long kept. He ducked inside, the smell of soot and old parchment filling his nostrils. Marlowe's small fire pit sat cold, and the old man's bed was tucked against the far wall. But something was wrong. Marlowe lay still, too still, as if sleep had taken him for good. Ethan's heart sank. The hermit had passed peacefully, his face relaxed, eyes closed as if dreaming of something pleasant. But in his hands, cradled against his chest, was a folded piece of parchment with Ethan's name scrawled on it in ink that had dried to a deep rust brown. Ethan knelt beside the old man and carefully pulled the letter from his fingers, his hands shaking slightly. He unfolded the parchment and read, "Ethan, you've been marked by a dream that is not yours. Follow it. The enchanted mirror lies where the world ends and begins again. You'll need a guide, a rare one. Do not be afraid when you meet him. Accept his help, or you won't survive what lies ahead. Trust the dream." The old man had known Ethan was coming. Even in death, Marlowe had found a way to offer him one last piece of advice. But before Ethan could process the gravity of it, he heard a sound that froze him in place. A knock, gentle and deliberate, against the wood frame of the cave's entrance. Ethan turned, his pulse hammering in his ears, and saw a silhouette standing just outside. It was enormous, hulking, and yet strangely polite in its posture, as if waiting patiently for permission to enter. The figure stepped forward into the light, revealing itself, a mandingo, one of the forest's fabled creatures. Its body was tall and sinewy, covered in coarse gray fur that shimmered like silver. It had the head of a jackal, with piercing gold eyes, and wore a tattered cloak draped over its shoulders. Ethan had heard tales of mandingos, frightening tales. They were said to be tricksters or worse, capable of both unspeakable kindness and terrible cruelty. Yet this one inclined its head respectfully. "I need your help," the mandingo said in a voice like gravel sliding down a mountainside, though there was no menace in it, only weariness. You dreamt of the mirror, didn't you? Ethan's breath hitched. How do you know? The Mandingo gave a slow, deliberate nod. Because I've been waiting for someone like you. The mirror lies at the bottom of the ravine from your dream, and without me, you won't survive the path to reach it. Ethan wanted to refuse, wanted to turn and run. But the memory of Marlowe's letter weighed on his mind. Do not be afraid. Accept his help, or you won't survive. Ethan swallowed his fear and gave a curt nod. All right, let's go. The journey to the ravine. The Mandingo led Ethan deeper into the forest, where the trees grew so thick that sunlight became a distant memory. Their path wound through jagged cliffs and over rushing streams, the landscape growing more surreal and treacherous with each step. The Mandingo moved with uncanny grace, guiding Ethan across narrow ledges and through dense thickets. Occasionally, the creature would pause, lifting its snout to sniff the air, as if sensing something Ethan could not see. At last, they reached the edge of a ravine that seemed to stretch endlessly below them, just as it had in Ethan's dream. The bottom was shrouded in mist, hiding whatever lay beneath. "We jump," the Mandingo said, crouching at the edge. Ethan's stomach lurched. "What?" "There's no other way to the mirror," the Mandingo replied. "Trust me, Ethan." And with that, the creature leaped, vanishing into the mist. Ethan stood frozen for a heartbeat, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But he took a deep breath, squeezed his eyes shut, and leapt. The mirror's truth. The fall was exactly like his dream, weightless and terrifying. But this time, he didn't wake before impact. Instead, the mist parted, and he landed softly on a bed of moss at the bottom of the ravine. The Mandingo was waiting, standing beside a stone altar. And upon that altar lay the mirror, an ancient thing, framed in twisted roots and veins of silver. Its surface shimmered like water under moonlight. Ethan approached cautiously, heart pounding. He knew instinctively that the mirror would show him something important, something that could change everything. When he looked into it, the surface rippled, and an image appeared. He saw himself, older, standing at the edge of a lake beneath a sky full of stars. Beside him was the Mandingo, no longer frightening but familiar, a companion rather than a stranger. And in Ethan's hands was the mirror, not as a burden but as a gift, something to be used wisely, not feared. The vision shifted, showing glimpses of joy and triumph, challenges overcome, and a life lived with purpose. When the image faded, Ethan stepped back, his heart light. "Now you understand," the Mandingo said softly. Ethan smiled, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over him. He knew the journey wasn't over, there would still be trials ahead. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt ready to face whatever the future held. Together they left the ravine, the enchanted mirror tucked safely under Ethan's arm, and began the walk back toward the forest's edge, toward a future that was finally, beautifully, theirs to shape.